if we're struggling with a skill shortage, if we're struggling because of other areas in the world have got conflict, if we're struggling with increases in pricing, if we're struggling to get things moving for various reasons within this country, and those are the blockers, well, why not make something that is going to be a positive change the blocker and have that stagnation happen because we're trying to achieve a positive thing, be it through products, be it through architects, be it through safer high-rise buildings, whatever it is, and that is worth fighting for.
Now's the time to get these things in place rather than trying to force it through at a point where the sector is breakneck trying to clear the backlog and get things through. So competence should always be welcomed. We should all be able to demonstrate it. It's too important. So I'm absolutely with you.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Adobe Acrobat.
Ryan, back from UK Construction Week and packed arena, I'm guessing, for your panel discussion last week.
Oh, it was like Live Aid. Yeah, I couldn't say for certain just how many were there, but no. I tell you, there was you forget how many different halls there are at the Excel and how many different things are on at once. But genuinely, I got off the underground and it was heaving. And I must admit, I don't tend to get that nervous about these things, but I did gulp a couple of times, thinking how crazy is this going to be? But no, it was a well attended show. It was good. So they've you've got Future Build, UK Construction Week, and the Stone and Surfaces show all happening within the same sort of group of halls at the same time. So yeah, lots of people exhibiting. I think it's still fair to say it's still different. If you've been to these shows sort of pre-pandemic, I would say I think there is definitely a before and after still, where the live events market is still figuring itself out. But as we just said off mic, then it was for the session itself. Seats were full, people stuck around for the full thing. The sort of caliber of questions asked was good. I think my fellow panelists were all brilliant. So yeah, it was a good one. Yeah, happy to be a part of it. So yeah, thanks again to the construction and built environment marketing guys for inviting me down to it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I didn't get along, unfortunately. Just stuck in my room doing busy work. So yeah, we can't go to everything, can we? But
well, no,
I
and
understand that one.
Happy to be this week's. It's UK Reef, isn't it? As people will be listening to this, which is, I don't know if you've been to that before, but it's just chaos, isn't it? So no, my colleague Joe, hello to him if he's listening. He's he's off doing that for us at this one. So I did mine last week. I'll take a break for this one.
Yeah. I mean, it's event season, isn't it? So I'm sure Digital Construction Week. Well, I know that's just around the corner, and there's plenty more to get your teeth stuck into if you missed any. There'll be another one, don't you worry. Speaking of another one, we've got another 3 headlines to cover this week, and I think it's about time we got back to a few industry numbers, facts and figures, and is there a bit of a growth or decline in the industry? And where are we, and what's it projected to look like in the future? It's about time we covered that, because we haven't in full focus for many a week. So our first headline is from Building, and this is: construction output growth accelerated in March despite impact of Iran war, official figures show. Now, I know that isn't the full story here, because there's a few underlying themes. I found it quite refreshing that the headline wasn't bleeding, even though it was leading, and it was a positive headline. Although, as I'd like you to dive into it, if you could, because this is massively your bag than mine, there are a few flies in this story.
But in fact, I think because you're absolutely right, there is that old "if it bleeds, it leads" thing, and God love us, but we tend to do that a bit more than most other sectors, I would think, within construction. It seems. Or maybe that's just because, in fairness, it's been a tough few years for various macroeconomic factors have meant that there's just been a lot. And I think I remember doing my journalism training 20 plus years ago now. And again, as well as "if it bleeds, it leads," another one of those things was "dog bites man" isn't a headline, but "man bites dog" absolutely is. So anything that anything that bucks anyone's expectations. And I think, sadly, given where we are at the minute, the fact that there are, to your point, there is a positive headline is actually the weird thing that stops people in their tracks, and it's the reason that we've selected it as an item for this week and are talking about it. So this is in relation to ONS data, which I will say, and I'm sure you and I will touch on this several times as we unpack some of the stats. There is a bit of a lag to these things. I mean, the fact we're talking about March data now as we almost are into June tells its own story. But for context, because I'd lost track of when it started, but well, we're allowed to call it a war, are we, according to President Trump? But the US-Israeli incursion into the Middle East started on the 28th of Feb. And again, you've seen how quickly that's affected oil prices, and then the knock-on effects of sort of oil and fertilizer and everything else that comes through the Strait of Hormuz, then into the wider economy. I think everyone was expecting these figures were going to be worse, and for a lot of the other economists or trade bodies in the sector that are maybe able to be a bit more nimble than ONS, because their data is kind of, it's projected forward and it's predictive as opposed to actual sort of in-market stats. If I take the CPA, for instance, they've already been pretty forthright in downgrading their outlook for the remainder of this year. I think where they were, we spoke about this before, haven't we? They were looking at something like 0.6 or 0.7% growth for the sector in 26. They're now looking at a 2.5% contraction within sector. So I think everyone that's been subjected to those headlines and has kind of felt things slow down a little bit within sector, to actually see that no, March there was actually growth is a bit of a shock. And as a complete aside, I think the same thing yesterday with the IMF coming out and saying that actually Britain's on for better economic growth than originally predicted. I think as another one of those sort of man bites dog sort of headlines that nobody was expecting, and therefore it gathers some traction. But yeah, to dive into it, 1.5% growth for the sector in March, which is the third consecutive month of growth according to the ONS. Private housing up 2.8%, which I think we've spoken about previously when the house builders had come out with their annual reports or with their sort of statements to shareholders and so on. They'd contextualize that by saying this was all existing demand that was in pipeline. It's people that had secured mortgage offers prior to lending costs going up because of what's happening in the Middle East, and therefore any downgrade is going to be seen in the sort of second half of this year. So pinch of salt massively with that. Commercial orders up. Commercial completions up 3.4% for the month. But this is where you mentioned fly in the ointment. This is a pretty sizable fly in the ointment. And I'd probably a sign I would suggest, if I'm not going to be too pessimistic, of where future ONS updates may be likely to land. But new orders down 10.5% quarter on quarter. And from memory, mate, it wasn't that quarter four of last year was so stellar that, of course, it could only go in one direction. So yeah, that feels, and again, you and I are part of our remit is to try and find the positives and keep people sort of buoyant and excited. So let's celebrate the fact that the growth is unexpected. Again, anecdotally, I don't know if many people have felt that growth necessarily, whether this is one of the things that appears on a spreadsheet but doesn't actually feel real and live to people within sector. But yeah, that as an underlying sort of canary down the mine, I would say that 10.5% contraction is it's going to start to show up in the delivery figures as we get further into the year, I would suggest. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I mean, they're throwing a lot of percentages around in this article. Do be warned. And it's I think it's one of those where you have to read and reread, and you're absolutely bang right. There is a bit of a lag with these particular things. We always look at the positives, so I'm going to try and stick onto that and focus on those bits, which was the growth in repair and maintenance, 3.4% increase, which is a massive positive. It almost make do and mend kind of attitude right now. You could see it as that. That, like, if you look at January, February, then March, you've got slow growth, and then March you're almost doubling or tripling the growth between those months. The one thing that I'm taking away from this is the word resilience. And the industry's come up against these things before, in various guises all across the world, and we always seem to overcome these, whether it's a case of we've got no choice, which it usually is, or it's a case of we are a resilient industry, which I think it is, or is it a case of the government steps in, gives us some help, provides a bit of relief, and helps where they can. Probably a bit of that as well.
Mm.
But I just think overall, we can look at the numbers, we can look at the figures, and it'll play out as it will play out. As we keep saying, we can't really affect what's happening in other parts of the world. We just focus on our own industry, particularly for this podcast and what we're talking about here. And I think it is that resilience that sees us through. So if there's any positives, yeah, the 10% to 10% plus is a bit alarming. But if there's any positives, it is there might be a storm coming, but it almost feels like we are prepared for it, and there are a few shining lights that we can focus on and build on those while we sort the rest out.
Yeah, I would guess that if it's not next week, I think certainly in the coming weeks we'll be back to another one of our old friends, which is the building safety regulator and what's happening on Gateway 3.
Mm.
But I think you're absolutely right. So just to jump back there, if there's one sector that has proved its resilience over recent years and sadly should be used to these seismic sort of macro impacts and everything that ripples out from there, is construction. I think we're at the sharp end of those things just because we are so exposed to um, you know, cost inflation. I think we're looking at something like 5% predicted for the remainder of this year being added on to every construction project. So, if your calculations are going to swing that violently, I think, not from one for sort of being leaping to the defense of contractors, but I can absolutely understand that if you've agreed a piece of work and now all of a sudden the cost of delivering that has jumped quite that much, then yeah, I guess that would make you sort of take pause and want to renegotiate. So yeah, I totally get where that comes from. I think on government intervention, again, how much it moves the needle, but I saw, as well as the IMF announcement yesterday, that they're pre-briefing the mainstream media now on the idea of the projected fuel duty rise being scrapped. So again, that provides some relief, I would think, for businesses that are reliant on, sort of baking that into their calculations. I would also argue that the very unpopular national insurance increase from last year might also provide a bit of relief for a sector with as many SMEs in it as ours. And again, we've covered apprenticeships and we've covered new talent into sector several times. And I would say the big thing from my point of view, and maybe I'm doing my takeaway prematurely here, but the demand and certainly the need for a lot of the things that we've got in pipeline hasn't gone anywhere. Putting the 1.5 million target to one side, we still have a chronic housing shortage. We still have a desperate need for an infrastructure update in many parts, if not all of the country. As we've said several times, for any legitimate criticisms of this government, them in their role as client and their willingness to invest in those things, you have to praise them for that. So none of that's gone away. It's just a case of viability, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's something that I would cling to, is that no one's saying no and nothing's being cancelled. It's just that things aren't yet at a point where it makes commercial sense to progress. So yeah, fingers crossed. Once we're on top of that, then there's plenty there to go at.
Yeah, absolutely. And they actually finished the article focusing on or suggesting that long term there will be growth. And they point towards the 1.5 million homes, of which I think we mention every single episode, that this current government are hanging their hat on for long term stability. So if there is anything to look at in terms of, okay, so the stagnation, decline, where's this going to go in long term? Well, the government are looking at 1.5 million homes. They need to be built somehow or some way to reach that. So, yeah, that's your long term focus.
Mhm.
If you want a smaller positive to take away from this article, or to end the article, if you like.
Yeah, but positive headline. Hey,
Yeah, we should have just stuck with the headline.
yeah, maybe this new format is just going to be news in brief, where it's just positive headlines and then no context.
I think now is a good time to just jump straight into our partners and how they can help people as well. Whether it looks bleak or whether we change this podcast completely and just focus on headlines, which would make it shorter and more efficient, which Adobe Acrobat AI Assistant helps you with. That was seamless, Pete. Well done. So what is AI Assistant within Adobe Acrobat? Essentially, it's a chat tool. It's an assistant to help you through complex tasks. Now, what do I mean by complex tasks? Well, if you open a PDF It could be things need rewording, or you need to replace certain words, numbers, or figures in a detailed financial document, for example. Certain pages need rotating, some are landscape, some are portrait. You need to do that. You need to sign documents in certain areas. Well, instead of using the various tools which Adobe Acrobat has, you just use AI Assistant and you prompt it and say, can you sign this document? Can you rotate the pages so they're all landscape or portrait or whatever it might be? So you don't have to learn new tools. There's no click, find new tool, edit. It's just all done through prompting and talking. And if you haven't checked it out, please do go to Adobe Acrobat Studio. Links in the show notes as ever, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the changes they've made from what most people will see as PDF viewer tool. It's so much more than that. Okay, back to our second story. Ryan, we've got bills coming out of our ears in more ways than one. But in this story, we're just going to talk about more from a legislation perspective and what's coming up for the next year. So this is all about the King's speech and setting out several key bills that will shape the construction sector. This is from PCB today. Um, I've got to ask, what's your favourite bill? There's plenty to
Well,
choose from.
there are, and lots that aren't in there as well, which is
Yeah.
interesting. But and maybe that's a good thing. So you're being for anyone sort of keeping an eye on what's happening within the psychodrama that is Westminster currently, and sort of the battle for leadership of the Labour Party and therefore the prime ministerial role. You'd be forgiven for not actually picking up on that there was a King's speech and there was a lot within there to hit on the construction sector. So the PBC article is a really nice kind of roundup of some of the key pieces of legislation. So for anyone that doesn't know, the opening of a new season of Parliament, the King will address sort of on behalf of his government the sort of legislative agenda. So the speech is very much written by the government of the day, but the King, for historical reasons, will deliver it as, here's what's going to be set out. And again, despite all of the back and forth that you'll see in the press at the minute, in the mainstream media and the tabloids, Labour has a stonking majority in Parliament. So where, for anyone with a long enough memory can remember back to the Theresa May government, for instance, where, her position became untenable because nothing would go through and her party were voting against her. Not much chance of that, even given the sort of impending game of musical chairs that we're going to have for the Labour Party leadership. So, yeah, you can take it as read that if you work in this sector, this isn't just legislation that's going to be debated in Parliament and may or may not be implemented. You are going to see this pass through and therefore have to live with it in some guise. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to take us through, Pete, some of this sort of the headline ones that they focused on.
Yeah. So I haven't got a favourite bill, unfortunately. They're all equal in my eyes. Yes. So we'll start with I suppose the most important ones from the way I see it, and that is like the care and duty to homeowners and the whole industry in a way. So remediation bill. So this is really focusing on cladding and making sure whoever's responsible for putting unsafe cladding on buildings removes it and installs what they should do anyway, and that is a safe build up and cladding of buildings. So that's like a huge ticket. And some of these just seem like no brainers. That one and the other one, the small business protection bill, which is all about late payments and making sure there's heavier penalties for those companies that aren't paying suppliers on time. We spoke about that in a recent episode as well. Then you got the nationalisation of the steel industry. That's coming. Energy independence. That's another one as well to help people who are in most need of help with energy bills as they are forever rising. And then you've got things like nuclear regulation as well to speed up approvals for new nuclear energy projects. So it's all exciting stuff. It's all there to help the industry. And then we've got a fair few reactions, positives and negatives. I think the thing to take away from it is make your own mind up, make your own judgment on these things. We've got various people's reactions throughout the whole industry. And it's almost in reading them, everyone's got their case. And for me, no one is right and no one's wrong in these sound bites, but it always feels that they want that bit more for their part of the industry. Forget the other bits. Yeah, I want more in this bill for this. You didn't do so. Take the positives away from it. And I suppose I'd do exactly the same in their
Mm,
uh, in their positions. But I think all in all, as you rightly said, a key focus on construction again,
mm,
with a lot of things that are going to help structure the industry in the right way. Can we go further? Yeah, of course we can. Can we get stronger scrutiny on certain areas? Absolutely, we always could. But then there's that little part of me that thinks you could change everything too soon. And I mean, Grenfell we're coming up to 10 years, I think.
mm.
And yeah, there's still things going through from um, the Building Safety Act that aren't fully up to speed and fully implemented, and everyone knows about them. So these things take time, but these bills there's a lot of positives I feel to take away from them.
Yeah, it's a really strange one, isn't it? Because I'm with you. It kind of feels like radical change needed, but then that's been one of the criticisms since it's 2 years now coming up for, isn't it? That since this government's been in, that too much change at once and too much legislation going through, and that the industry can't keep up with the pace of sort of change. So it's a bit of an unspectacular announcement as sort of King's speeches go. I mean, to look at the things highlighted there, they're all great. That they will help massively again for a sector. I touch on it every single week, and I mentioned it in the first item that we did there. That it's 98+% SMEs. Anything that helps on the payment front will be sort of seismic incrementally. If that isn't too ironic in terms, but sorry, contradictory in terms rather. That will be massive to this sector. I think in February, well, every year typically construction ends up being the one that has the most insolvencies as a sector. We were over 300 insolvencies in February, and a lot of those are otherwise healthy, viable businesses where a large contract is just not paid. So anything that stops that from happening, because again, it's not just that business closes; it's all the suppliers that they owed money to, and the people that were employed there are now economically inactive in their local communities and so on. So on paper, that looks like a very small thing to just say blanket 60-day payment
Mm.
terms, but the actual impact of that could be enormous. I would say one thing from selfishly, because I'm going to do the same thing as the commentators that are in there now, in wanting sort of one thing more on top of the bits that are in there. I thought not a lot was made about the sort of review of, and maybe it's because it's not legislation yet, but reviewing right to buy. Because I was looking through all of these, going,
Mm.
they're all great. They're all really useful things in and of themselves. Security, steel is massively, massively important to us as a sector. So security of supply there is huge. You've already mentioned it, but the impact that some of the household energy reforms will have to people that are struggling the most in this country, again, that's a brilliant thing to do. But back to our first item, how much of these things actually stimulate demand in sector? And I thought the only thing that really kind of potentially moved the needle on that was I've heard a lot of the major house builders talk about the need for a new version of Right to Buy, or just bring
Mm.
back Right to Buy or Help to Buy. The just that support on deposit made so many sort of first time buyers move into market and sort of drive that sort of starter home stock part of the market that I thought that has the potential to really sort of move things along. But I don't know what I was expecting, but a little bit more, I think, in terms of just impetus to move things along. As I said, we know the pipeline is there. Um, how much can government intervene and how much can government do to sort of help us realize that potential? So a lot in there that is useful and that I think people will benefit from. But yeah, maybe a sort of C plus, maybe a B. I would give them for, not that you were asking. But yeah, I think it was a reasonable King's speech. But yeah, I was maybe hoping for something that just, I don't know, had a bit more impetus for delivery in there, I guess.
Well, maybe he had a lot on that day. His mind was elsewhere.
Yeah, I would I would guess so, mate. But yeah, actually, let's see who's in charge. Again, the other thing that's missing within there, we spoke about off mic, is sort of general product regulations and product reform coming through. That's kind of front of mind for me at the minute, and I didn't hear an awful lot in there either. So that tells me that there's perhaps some other things in the works anyway. So watch this space. And of course, subscribe to us and we will keep you posted with any further legislative developments that are relative to the sector as we go.
Well said. Well said. But before we move on, I've got one gripe within this article, and that's
What?
with Melanie Leach, CBE, the interim chief executive at Real Estate UK, and she's talking about how UK remains preferred destination for both domestic and global capital, but they need clear signals from the government that they'll take necessary steps to bridge the viability gap as things slightly change, as we spoke about on the first article. But then she says, bridge the viability gap, reduce the costs of development, and deliver on the promise that the UK will build, build, build. It's build, baby, build. Melanie, have you learned nothing from listening this podcast?
Oh, poor Steve Reed. The amount he spent on those red caps, and it's just us. It's just us. It's you and I sort of saying that phrase back and forth to one another, and it's not landing, is it?
Yeah. Red caps in the post.
Shame.
Yeah. So Melanie, get your sound bites right. I can't even say it. Get your sound bites right. Moving on.
Yeah, get
Moving
us out
on.
of here.
Yes, I will. On to the third and final headline. This is from what seems to be our go-to source, our favourite part of the industry at this moment, and that is architects. And this is from Architects Journal. And I think both you and I agree that this is probably our fave headline from this week. And this is to end the anyone can do it era. RIBA proposes framework for protection of function. But before we get into this, Ryan, I've got a hugely important question to ask you.
Go on.
Should it be RIBA or should it be the RIBA?
I'm just, probably, technically speaking, it should be the RIBA, the Royal Institute, but it's RIBA, isn't it? It's and in fairness, I've known it as RIBA ever since I've been in the sector. So, should we go with RIBA? Should we make that call?
Yeah, I think I'll go with you. We'll make that call. They use both. It's interchangeable, I think, is the correct answer. But we'll go with RIBA because it just sounds correct.
Yeah.
Even if it isn't, we're going with it. So
well, I was going to say, because we've mentioned this. I don't know if we've ever done it as an item, but we've definitely referenced this. Has been rumbling on for years, probably, but this feels like the culmination of it. A couple of months now. So if I jump back a little bit, RIBA, not the RIBA, but RIBA president, Chris Williamson, he wrote an open letter a couple of months back now, saying that he was going to not renew his ARB membership, which is again another acronym, the Architects Registration Board. So, in order to practice in the UK, for anyone not aware, you have to hold ARB status. You cannot hold the title of architect and cannot practice under that title. RIBA is a separate body that is voluntary and can be signed up to, but you have to be an ARB registered architect in order to practice. But basically, in protest and to kind of show the ridiculousness of the current situation, the sitting RIBA president is now no longer, strictly speaking, a practicing architect, as in the title, and yet can do a lot of the same tasks that an architect can do. And that's, it's slightly laughable, but that's the point that is being made here, is that there is protected status for the title of architect. So you and I can't call ourselves that, and there's one particular person within my network whose name I shan't mention. If you mention the phrase architect in connection to anything that isn't, so there is another podcast which is very good called Marketing Architects. He takes huge umbrage with anyone being able to use that title outside of architecture, and rightly so. But that's kind of the point here, is that the title's protected, but the functions of the role aren't, which is slightly scary. Again, when you think of what that means, and I'm sure you'll go into detail here, but the crux of what RIBA are presenting here and sort of lobbying on is that fundamentally this is about life safety. This is about how safe buildings are that are being designed. It's about the competence of people that are involved in that process. It's about accountability. So this isn't just a white collar profession that is being a bit stuffy about, I've worked for this title and therefore call me this. This is you wouldn't have it in other professions, would you? The sort of medical profession, for instance, you wouldn't accept a diagnosis on a particular ailment from someone that isn't qualified to do so. There is a kind of protected sort of meaningful thing there, and I think it's an absolutely sound argument that should be the case here. So yeah, I don't know what do you make of this one?
Yeah, it's a lot of meat on the bone, I think, for architects here, in that what they're proposing is that, and wholeheartedly agree, because I think most professions need these um, legislations, laws, rules, governance, whatever you want to call it, within place. And I say that from the point of view of being a marketer and
Hmm.
seeing, again, mentioning no names, but seeing people class themselves as marketers, which they're just not, and it's highly frustrating.
To be clear, Pete, just for the record, you don't mean me when you say that, because that felt very loaded then.
I'm not mentioning any names. All I'm saying is that agency owners do not need to be marketers.
Very good, very good. Please continue.
Oh, okay, okay. So, just for the record, no, I didn't mean Ryan. He's a fully competent marketer, of which I do hold counsel with quite a lot and get his opinion on a lot of marketing aspects. Just for clarity, I don't think that's going to be the soundbite for this week's show. By the way,
No, because it does kind of sound
um,
like a hostage note, and like I've made you come back and cut this into the edit. So yeah.
it does. It does. Yeah, absolutely. So back to RIBA, and what are we talking about here? What are they saying? So only authorized professionals can submit planning and building regulation applications for most projects. By most projects, they mean pretty much absolutely any project than your smaller domestic projects, which absolutely notice around the local area that this is going on, and get it built. Someone needs their new kitchen, let them have their new kitchen. You know what I mean? Um, but this is all under the chartered and it's going to be chartered and regulated by the Built Environment Council, or under that guise. So it's more looking at a holistic view of the industry, putting it in there with a whole host of other things. Um, and then what they're saying is these activities that are going to be reserved for architects is things like planning submissions, fire safety strategies, structural design, certification. So almost all the building work you'd expect to happen, and the important part of it as well. So this isn't just, like you were saying, it isn't just I'm an architect, therefore
Mm.
I can wear a badge and go to certain events. It is I'm an architect, and I am going to be, if you flip reverse it, I'm going to be liable for these particular things because I have earned the rights to be liable for these things. So it's bold, it's brave, and I personally feel it's much needed in most industries.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I was thinking back to a good friend of mine who's a mechanical engineer by trade, working in the glamorous world of Formula One now. But he was telling me years ago when he was becoming qualified that Germany's one country that takes this kind of thing phenomenally seriously. And obviously, he was talking engineer rather than architect, but if you have a business card that carries the word engineer and can't demonstrate certain competencies and hold certain qualifications, then that's a jailable offence over there. So again, not that the RIBA is suggesting anything quite as strong as that, but yeah, I think the
Yeah,
sentiment is similar. And I love the idea again of that point of it's not a protectionist thing. It's not and it could be, they're the Royal Institute representing architects, so they'd be well within their rights to do so. But it feels more altruistic. It feels about sort of the good of the sector and sort of protection and so on. This idea of a built environment council that is more about lifelong learning and competence, and the other people that don't hold, much like Chris Williamson, that don't hold ARB sort of architect status, which is just for architects. That the council model, opens out to, an engineering council, legal services, and so on. That anyone, to your point, that has an interest in this, um, yeah, could and should be regulated. I think there's kind of a bit of for all of the irony here, in as per the last sort of item, that we don't want to over legislate necessarily, but some things need it. And
mhm.
again, my head is very much into construction products at the minute. And the lack of regulation is quite startling. I've been a big advocate of CCPI for some time, if for no other reason than it codifies things, it identifies where competence is required, it defines competence. And I think for marketers, for all, tongue in cheek, slightly backhanded compliments about, but there should be a framework in place that defines what competence looks like, and who should be allowed to practice these things. It's too important not to. You referenced it a little bit earlier, I think, but the last government update was that 70% of the recommendations from Dame Judith Hackett have been implemented now, which is great, but it's taken us a decade to get to this point. And obviously, to be clear, what RIBA is suggesting is not linked to Grenfell, sort of overtly linked to Grenfell or Hackett recommendations in any way. It's a very separate thing. But yeah, I do think that there is there's a Venn diagrammatic effect where these things do start to overlap at a certain point, and I just think more evidenced competence within the sector cannot be a bad thing throughout the supply chain. So I absolutely welcome what RIBA are doing. I think it's sound. And I think, there is opportunities for other parts of the supply chain and other parts of the sector to do the same thing. And yeah, I think we would all be better for it. And yes, there might be a slight slowing down of during the implementation phase. But once everyone is up to speed and once you only have competent, evidenced, competent people within market, then you would hope things run much more smoothly as a result. So yeah, good luck to RIBA. I genuinely hope that they're able to push some change through here, because I think it's not just for themselves, but I think for the sector, it's a really, really necessary thing. And one of those things, again, where you look back and go, why isn't this in place anyway? So yeah, good luck to them. I hope this lands.
Yeah, same. Here. Okay, takeaways. I'm going to jump straight into this one because it links to what you've just been talking about there. And my takeaway for this week is very much, if you look at what RIBA are proposing, and the argument potentially could be this is going to slow down things. It can get stuck at the very start of projects because you have to find somebody that is chartered and accredited and signed up to this thing, and a practitioner. And it might reduce that pool of architects and talents that can do that, and then you have a bit more stagnation further along the supply chain. But if we're struggling with a skills shortage, if we're struggling because of other areas in the world have got conflict, if we're struggling with increases in pricing, if we're struggling to get things moving for various reasons within this country, and those are the blockers, well, why not make something that is going to be a positive change the blocker, and have that stagnation happen because we're trying to achieve a positive thing, be it through products, be it through architects, be it through safer high-rise buildings, whatever it is, that should be the stagnation. And that is worth fighting for, rather than our focus on skill shortage and our focus on prices increase and things like that. They're massively important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't impact the industry, but they're impacting our industry all the time anyway. So let's get these hard yards out of the way, and we're in a much better position once they're done.
Not here, and just to, it's not my takeaway necessarily, but just to tack onto that if there is going to be a period of let's call it stagnation, but yeah, if things are going to get a little bit quiet, if that dip in demand that we mentioned in the first article comes to pass, now's the time to get these things in place. Rather than trying to force it through at a point where the sector is breakneck, trying to sort of clear the backlog and get things through. So, competence should always be welcomed. We should all be able to demonstrate it. It's too important. So, yeah, I'm absolutely with you. I would say for mine, the very, very quick one is just echoing back to something that we said within the ONS item earlier on, is that demand hasn't gone anywhere. So yeah, don't lose hope, don't lose focus. This was a very, very unexpected positive announcement. Let's hope there's more. Let's hope we're having more of these kind of items in the coming months where we are positively surprised by what the economy is doing and its impact on the sector. But if not, nobody's cancelled anything quite yet. It's deferred gratification. So yeah, stick with it. And let's land the job at some point.
Fantastic. Let's land that job and speak to you next week.
Cheers, Pete.